Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar in our continuing series of content for publishing and media industry. Today's topic is moving beyond cookie-based ads in a publisher's business. I'm Brett Kierstead. I'm Vice President of Sales for Knowledge Marketing. I appreciate everybody showing up this month. A little bit of housekeeping. On the GoToMeeting screen or panel, you have the ability to submit questions along the way, which we will hope to get to at the end. All attendees will receive a link to a recording of today's webinar to share and as well, and potentially some additional follow-up information. So just a little bit about knowledge marketing, so you know where our basis comes from. We're a data management platform services provider for the publishing industry. We focus on helping our clients make money from data and use that information in a variety of different ways. We offer technologies in support of email marketing, traditional circulation services, as well as data collection technology around forms and landing pages. Many of the clients that you see on the screen are folks that you may know that work with knowledge marketing, again, to leverage information and data to help them drive additional revenue and new ideas within their business. Today, again, we're going to focus on the idea of the cookie and how advertising is changing as publishers go through and remonetize their business as they navigate away from or enhancing traditional channels through a new idea. And so we're going to cover a couple of different ideas. We're going to talk a little bit about the online ad environment. We're going to explain cookie-based ads, make sure that we're all grounded in a good definition of what's going on out there. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the issues that people are encountering from that, what data as an opportunity can provide to you, and then I'll give you a really kind of a fun best practice example that hopefully you can glean onto and translate it into a way that you plan your own activities moving forward. So let's talk about online ads, and my observation, I look around as we have really think about the legacy in our industry of how ads were bought and sold in an offline world. They started with ads a certain way, and then we started to tie ads to content, and we had this mindset of how we sold print ads. And today, we're kind of in still the early stage of transforming, especially in some legacy industries in B2B, about how online ads are sold. So you see this print ad mindset that is evolving into an online channel. So on the top is an example of a blogger in a magazine that has embedded within it a contextual ad for Olay. Now online we have an article that's online with an ad that's embedded in it related to the content. So in some ways we're just replicating the same ideas that we've done for a long time without putting any innovative thought into new ways of doing things through our fun and more robust online channel. We use terms like this. Here's a website. Many of you have them. You have run-of-site ads that you might sell at the top navigation bar. You might on your home page sell an ad block in the corner so that when people come to the general home page, an advertiser buys that slot. A lot of you have article-based full ads, so here's an article and you find an advertiser that looks at the subject of that and places ad content in a full-page manner. There's lots of different places now where your folks are using the cookie, which we'll talk about, a browser cookie to grab someone else's, a user's previous navigation experience and run some kind of ad within one of your pages based on that browser experience. And so a lot of those ads are what's going on today. And if you think about it for just a second and you just step back and think about the conversations, we're really having the same kind of conversations as we've always had, but with a new kind of language. So what used to be called, I'll sell you a quarter-page ad, now people say, I'll sell you a 240 by 480 display. Or we used to have a rate card, but now we've fully evolved into a CPM. Or we used to sell advertorials, but now we sell online contextual ads. We used to count subscribers, now we count impressions. We used to get response cards, but now we get leads. You know, the number of issues we have and how long your ad will run, now we call it site duration. And we used to use data like BPA data, and now we use Google Analytics. So I want to just remind us that any kind of change that goes on in how you run your business requires a new way of thinking. To me, I see a lot of these things and I hear these conversations, and I see people just kind of translating an old way with a new language, but in many cases saying the same thing. You know, there's other impacts that are coming into our industry. You guys who are out there, maybe the salespeople, and there's this talk of real-time bidding where, you know, your placements and your blocks are sent out into the ether for a bidding process, and it's this automated exchange between the advertiser and publisher and an exchange of ads. And, you know, some people are thinking maybe this is a core strategy or a way of selling excess inventory, etc. But, you know, as these kinds of things happen, they have impacts across how you guys make money, and then the people involved with that, whether it be the people responsible for the sites or queuing up the ads or selling the space, are impacted by it. So clearly we've got kind of a lot of dynamics going on right now in how you guys are dealing with this new asset that you have, or this maybe maturing asset that you have in online ad space, and what can we do about it. So let's talk a little bit about cookies. Everybody knows about cookies. They get a lot of publicity around privacy issues, but still a lot of people don't really know or maybe really understand what's going on there. You know, if you look at Wikipedia, it says a cookie is a small piece of data stored in a user's web browser. People call it an HTTP cookie, a web cookie, a tracking cookie, a browser cookie, what have you. But as you navigate around the web, people are placing snippets of code within your browser information to identify who you are. And they're doing that for a whole host of reasons, including the placement of ads. You know, so that could come from a visit that you make, if you register for something, if you click on an email link. All of these things trigger that kind of a placement. And then they could put in that the username, maybe a password, your browsing history, the type of device, the IP address, you know, basically online data that gets placed into that cookie for identification purposes. So that way, as you navigate around, the machine and the website that you're on makes decisions for you about things like content. Ads specifically, maybe on a page like this, you see that there's ad blocks on there. They may, you know, third-party vendors like DoubleClick or Access, which used to be Real Media, or Ad Choices from Google. These guys are playing content potentially into blocks that you have sold based on a cookie profile. And they're presenting that information away so that as I navigate to this page, there's some personalization for me based on some previous information that was collected or provided on my cookie on my machine. Those providers then go out to a content bank that's out there stored in the ether or on the cloud, and based on some information or algorithms, either by the site or by cookie, provides an ad into that block. There's an organizations like the Digital Advertising Alliance that are out there trying to make sure that this is done in a crisp, consistent, clean, ethical, fair way. So this is a very logical and straightforward way of how people serve up content, how people use content ads, and how people use the cookie as well as some external source in order to provide this kind of insight or visibility onto a web page. This is a technical looking thing, but basically what goes on underneath, for those of you who are geeks and understand this stuff, there's code structure underneath every underlying page which provides instructions on what happens. So it says if this is a certain place on the site, if it's a certain find of information, if the cookie says this thing at that thing, it takes some decisions, sends instructions out to a third party, and that ad is played into that block based on those sets of instructions. Okay, so we're not going to spend all day understanding JavaScript, but certainly you guys understand, at least at a high level, that something goes on behind the scenes that's causing instructions on what gets played. The advantages of doing things the way that they're doing now through cookies is they're very easy to set up. It does encourage personalization. So again, it's not everybody who comes to the site gets the same ad. So the step towards personalization is good as more and more people want that kind of website experience, even for the ads that they see. It's helpful as a process for excess inventory. If you don't have an advertiser that's signed up for a block, you can use the cookie and some pre-existing business rules to just play an ad from a third party into that space to, again, get impressions. And it does give you broad access to a lot of content and ads. So you don't have to create anything custom there. There's a library and inventory. So there's a lot of advantages of doing things the way they are as a good first step from where we've evolved from offline. However, we also want to talk to you guys about some of the issues that people are experiencing. And we really want you to think about whether these things are impacting you in a certain way, or if they're not today, whether this is something that's going to be facing you moving forward. And there's four kind of issues that I think about. One of them is what context, or poor context, the impact that has on brand erosion. Number two is what's going on from a competition standpoint, and the fact that these competitors are game changers in terms of how media space is bought and sold. We want to talk a little bit about data valuation and what your part is in that. And similarly, when we just think overall about differentiation, what is your role? What do you do that makes you different? So let me show you a simple example. Here's an example of why I think this kind of strategy has brand erosion. Here's a website from Better Homes and Gardens, okay? And there's an article on here, as you guys see on many of your sites, think of this. It says, are you arranging your furniture wrong? I'm interested in understanding what goes on while I'm redoing my room. I go to Better Homes and Gardens and I see this article. Well, they're, unfortunately, in my opinion, because they placed a cookie, they're using an ad choices cookie from my navigation. The ad that pops up into the block affiliated with that article is from Bizzo. Now, I like Bizzo, and I've been to their site before, but what does that have anything to do with how I rearrange furniture? So I'm asking myself, what kind of a user experience or content complement is this to how I do things? Because, again, I'm just simply using the ad choices cookie that was placed, or Better Homes and Gardens is using the ad choice cookie that was placed into my machine and randomly showing whatever happens to be there. Okay, so number one, it's a degrading to my brands by having non-contextual ads played. The second thing is competition is redefining the rules. I don't know if you've ever heard of these guys, LinkedIn and Facebook. They're doing pretty good. And here's some of the reasons what they do. So if you've ever looked at Facebook advertising, and many of you who are on the business-to-business side may not have done this, but here's the mindset. Everything you've offered up on Facebook, all of the information, and on LinkedIn for that matter, your personal information, all of this stuff is available to use for an advertiser to place targeted ads. Okay, so in this case, you go into the little module. It allows you to pick birth date or location or education or blah, 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 right? All of the really stuff that you've ponied up in your Facebook profile. And so what happens then is you always think to yourself, why do they put those ads in Facebook? What the heck's going on? Well, guess what they're doing? As I think you all know, they're looking at all your information and they're creating ad targeting algorithms based on that profile. So in this case, if this is mine, it says my income, my interests, my brands, the discussions, the groups, my profile is saying, hey, here's Marriott. And I happen to be, interestingly enough, a Marriott Platinum Rewards member. So they are actually playing me relevant information based on brand experience. Okay? So again, that mindset, guys, is shifting into the ad agencies and the people and the RFPs that you as publishers are being asked to deal with. The next thing is data. You know, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but over the years, as you guys have been using third-party data providers, data networks or ad networks, or you've been leveraging other people's networks for information and ads, you know what they've been doing is they've been collecting all that data from you, your data, your readers, your subscribers, and turning that into incredibly lucrative businesses. We all know that LinkedIn was just purchased Bizzo because they wanted to build a robust marketing platform and paid them $175 million. DoubleClick was sold a few years ago, the original kind of ad serving network, to Google for $3 billion. my question to you is twofold. Do you know where they got the data? And how much of that did you get when it was done? So I think one of the challenges is we have to ask ourselves is, are we making money off our data? Are we just helping somebody else make money because all we want to do is get a quarter of a penny off a click right now? Meanwhile, they're turning around and turning that data that you allow them to have access to into a subscribed asset. And lastly, as technology emerges, if those of you that are salespeople on the phone or media sales and ad salespeople and work with your strategic clients, I always ask this question in previous webinars: what makes us different as salespeople or professionals than an automated cookie-based buying and ad placement process? We still have to continue to find differentiation so that this automated process, which is very efficient, isn't replacing us who are a lot more strategic. Okay, so those are the issues that are out there. Now we got to figure out what to do about it. Okay, and data and information, again, is at the root of what's really changing the way smart and savvy marketers and advertisers are using their websites to drive results. Here's a good little simple mindset that we like to share and think about. The legacy of publishing and media companies is they walk into a sales presentation or they talk about their media kit and they start with their products. And then after they finish describing their products, they turn around and they talk about the data and the statements and the information and services and ads and things that come from that. But that mindset really needs to be replaced by flipping it over and starting with your data, your community, your audience, your network. And from that, you can talk about your products, services, and ads. Again, LinkedIn built a gigantic business that started with data and community, and from that became products. Their first product was just free. And then all of a sudden, once they had the data and the network, they built products, and now they're doing ads and content around that. So again, the first thing starts with a shift in mindset, where data is at the centerpiece of how we represent our business. When we talk about data and websites, think about it this way. So first piece is that there's a distinction. When someone shows up anonymously, we have no information. They are anonymous. They show up on a website and we say, 1,000 people visited our site, we have no idea who they are. Okay? A better one is the cookie. So a cookie says, in storage, says, well, we don't know a ton about them, but we know they've been here before, and now we're going to start tracking some of their activities, at least in an online world. Okay, so again, we've kind of removed anonymous, and now maybe we say, we still don't know who this is, but we know their browser navigates around quite a bit and is interested in certain things. But really, what you have as an asset as a publisher is what we call a complete data profile, the real rich amount of information that you have that is complete on everybody within your audience across all your products and brands. And let me show you what that means. So again, all these online sources have nothing on you. You've got demographic data. You've collected over many years from qualification cards and subscription forms and reg forms, all of this rich information. Now you start to have behavioral stuff. You've been sending out editorial content, any newsletters, and they've also been going to events and webinars. All of your people have been doing these things, and you're collecting this information. And if you're following them and tagging your content and being smart, you also know everything people are interested in. So at the end of the day, you take those and you add them together, and you have an asset, an incredible asset of a unified audience database that combines all these various different touch points into one beautiful, consolidated, rich asset. And what I always like to remind publishers who always think about the value of doing this is that people say, oh, LinkedIn, they're so wonderful, they have so much information, and now they're getting into the content business. What they forget to realize is that most publishers have more information than even LinkedIn does. But yet they fail to use it in a strategic way, in this case specifically as they talk about how you guys sell ad space. Okay, so we want to think in mind, do we have an asset that we can use to move beyond the cookie, which is really just an online tracking mechanism for somebody's previous behavior? And that individual profile looks like this, where it's got, company information, and we may have asked some qualifying questions about revenue size and budget. We know what behave, we know what they attend, we know so much about these individuals, we need to put this into action. Okay? And lastly, a cookie, as you can guess, also gets stale. because you place it at a certain point in time, and then it tells you maybe some basic information about what I did at a certain point in time and stores that. But in a database world where your readers and subscribers are engaging with your content and products every day, every second that they're engaging with different content, you have an up-to-date asset. So cookie-based advertising a lot of times spends it living in the past, looking at the way things used to be, but yet here we are with incredibly robust information like Facebook and LinkedIn. We need to use it based on what we know right now. So let me show you guys what that means. This is a little bit technical. You get the business issue here too, but I want to explain it so that you can kind of think, how could we go do this? Because, theory is one thing, but action is what really sets apart the people that are thinking about doing things versus the people that are actually doing them. One of our clients is Scranton Gillette Communications out of Chicago, and they're very innovative, really smart folks, great to advertise with, very client creative in terms of how they use information that they've collected and how it integrates with their online world. They're in the construction space and building space, kind of a legacy thing if you think about it. They're not high tech in that sense, but they're very, very savvy in sort of how they use information. Okay? So let's think about the workflow again that we said before. When a visitor comes to the website, right, they start out, obviously they're on a browser somewhere, they click on something, and they come to the website, and when we still use the cookie that we've placed on there, but instead of using that as a decision on what ads we play, we simply use it to identify, do we know who this person is? Do we know them because they registered before? Do we know them because they clicked on an email from an editorial product? How do we know who this person is? And if the cookie tells us this is Brett, we know who Brett is, then the next question we have to ask is, what all do we know? Right? We want to know from this data all the information that we've collected in every place right now in real time. What do we know about him? Okay? So how that works technically is every publisher and every media company has a content management system, and they all today are wired up to look at various different sources. And basically you use an API. We all understand how that process works, and it looks at the data, it looks at that profile and says, hey, we know who this guy is. Let's figure out all the information about him, and then from there, let's decide what do we want to do with it, okay? So that we may look at his answers that he's had on questions. He said he works at an engineering firm. He said his company has a certain employee size. You guys know all these questions. You ask job title. You ask sales volume. You ask what kinds of products that they support. You ask if they are a decision maker. These are the kinds of things that you've been asking offline for years, but they're just sitting out there somewhere in some kind of stagnant circulation database, not being used to create value online. You also want to ask about website visits. Yes, you may cookie them. A cookie might just say they visit a website, but your tracking mechanism can tell you every site they visit, every article they read, all the interesting things about them. It also can tell you whether they've opened emails, clicks, is this an active person? We could also say things like, what's their subscriber status? Are they currently up for expiration or renewal? Think of all the ways that you could grab content and then return the information. So instead of saying, here's a guy who has visited some websites, what we're doing is, and what Scranton and these guys are doing that's smart, is they're saying, we know who this is. We know from his profile he's a hardware buyer. He works at a very large prospect. He is a subscriber. He works at a company with $1 billion in revenue. His title puts him in the C-level category. He's a very active clicker, and his primary topics of interest is faucets. Okay? So instead of the previous equation, now we add into it, we say, visitor was anonymous, came to our site. We recognize him in the cookie, we got him. We ping the user profile, we return all this wonderful information, and we say, this guy is a dream for Delta Faucet. One of our advertisers that's a big client, that's somebody very important to us. Okay? So imagine if you're any kind of salesperson, if you're thinking about this, the story that you tell to Delta about this equation. So here's how it goes. When that happens, technically, what they're allowed to do from a technology standpoint is your content management system recognizes the person, and it sends instructions to either a third-party advertiser, a third-party ad server like Axis or like DoubleClick or what have you, and says, when this type of person comes, send back the ad for Delta. Or, frankly, a lot of content management systems don't even need that. They don't even need that third party because that may be an in-house ad of such an important customer that they don't need to send that information out. They just render that ad based on the profile of that individual that they've looked up. So again, imagine what we're trying to create here in the experience that they're creating not only for the user, but also for the advertiser. No Better Homes and Gardens situation where we're playing Bizzo's ad on an article about furniture and home redecorating or remodeling. So, and I think, and our clients believe it's superior to real-time bidding. In real-time bidding, you might bid on some kind of open inventory or space, but this is strategic selling. We have the ability, if we use this logic, to instead of saying, oh, this is a really popular place with lots of impressions, instead we say, we've got a block on here that is serving content and your ads based on a very rich and deep profile, not only that is in your target audience, but offers you an opportunity to place a premium ad to that individual. So real-time bidding is cute, and it takes us out of the conversation, but I would argue for the advertiser, it's not strategic. But this approach, this data-oriented, profile-oriented approach is significantly more strategic and of value. And here's how it manifests itself if you want to break it down. Imagine walking in and saying, we're so sophisticated as an ad, as a content site and as an advertising and investment partner for you that we've set up the following logic. We have a site, it's very active, and it's got a lot of people on here. Everybody can tell you that. And everybody can place an ad on there, or even do something as cute as putting content in there. But here's what we do. We make sure that we look hardcore in real time at the individual profile themselves of who shows up there. For anonymous people, if we don't know who they are, they've come from Google or an SEO search or what have you, the price for that is X. However, we also recognize that we can find people that are engaged in our content, and anybody that's actively engaged that we know is a clicker, we have a price of 2X. But even better than that, we have the opportunity to make a very rich profile decision. We look at that practice, that profile, that individual, all of that real-time data from their entire profile, and present you with an opportunity to get your message in front of these high-value people. And what no one is doing, and what your competitors are not doing, and what traditional basic cookie-based ads is not doing, is taking the extra step of integrating this information in there. I guarantee you walk into an advertiser and you present this idea of a more smart and targeted ad program with a better and more specific call to action to their high-value targets based on a very current and complete up-to-date profile. I guarantee you have a competitive offering. And I guarantee you for yourself, for your conversions and your ad experience, that this Delta Faucet ad is far more appropriate in the building and construction area than is the Bizzo ad on Better Homes and Gardens. So the goal, again, guys, is to create for you a differentiated sale. You're being attacked by a lot of sources for people to advertise to individuals, be it online or elsewhere. And the best asset you have is the ability to use this kind of information for a very personalized experience. So your competition will walk into an agency or a response to an RFP, and they'll say, oh, we've got wonderful products, incredible products. They'll show Google Analytics statistics on anonymous impressions. They'll talk about the placement of site ads. They'll talk about how they can pair it up with content that's, so everybody who's on that page reads and sees an ad if they're reading about a certain piece of content, about a companion ad. They'll talk about how they get data from the cookies, so they follow people around, you know. They'll talk about basic lead info, like, hey, I'm passing you over a name or an email address, or even anonymous data, or something very simple. Or they'll be talking about how they can get you into their real-time bidding network for the competitive site that you're on. But guys, you have the ability to go in and say something very different. You have the ability to go in and talk about a unified data. Our customers and folks like Scranton, they walk in and they say, we're not just selling products. We have data and a rich profile. We don't just talk about anonymous visitors and present them with some kind of inappropriate or random ad. We identify them and we target your ads and content directly to them. We don't just focus on content, but we have a full user profile. We look at the demographic data, the behavioral data, the contextual data, and we use their online and offline data that you as publishers have captured and cultivated for many years. You know, we look at not just a basic lead. We send over or make available to you a comprehensive lead profile, which shows their buying influence and all of the attributes of them, their click and open activity. It's something, such a robust thing when a lead goes over to your advertiser and to their salespeople. And lastly, and most important, I think this kind of approach, this kind of strategy and thoughtfulness is what I call, you know, superior premium selling. You're thoughtful. You're not just pitching, you know, ad space through a real-time bidding network. You know, it's differentiating the conversations that you have with your advertisers beyond just we look at the cookie and we send them some, you know, kind of fresh or ad from an ad network that is consistent with some other place they've browsed before. So again, the key ideas to think about. Online strategy is not webifying print. A lot of these conversations that are going on today are simply coming up with clever new words for the same old strategy. It's really a different mindset, as I've tried to show you today. Remember, think data first, not products and ads. Is the first conversation that you have about data and intelligence and audience, or is it about products, ads, and information? Which is it? Which do you start with? Third, differentiate by telling people you use a fresh profile, not a stale cookie. You know, you really are focused on making sure your advertisers and your readers and subscribers have great online experience based on the most up-to-date information, just like the Facebooks and LinkedIns of the world do. And lastly, I say a little effort here will give you big differentiation. The technology is not difficult in today's day and age. You know, and really these sites are meant to communicate. The CMS systems, whether it's Drupal or WordPress or whatever, really do a nice job in their technology relationship with data sources and with third-party web ad services. So there's not really, it doesn't need to be a big technical excuse here or barrier to make little bit of effort. You can provide big differentiation. So thank you so much for coming. There's a couple of quick questions. I'll just take one since I'm a little over on time. A little bit on the data side. It basically is asking, you know, are you still compromising your data to third parties? And the answer is, you know, potentially yes. Again, you control your site information. You control what calls potentially and what data is sent over to a third party. Sometimes, many of our clients, instead of having so much of their inventory on their website sold through third parties, they're trying to house some of that inventory themselves for key advertisers. In that case, you don't need the ad network from a third party. They're really trying to do their best to only use third party when they can't sell inventory, as opposed to, because again, to that point, they don't want to be sending out that data. You know, a good thought that somebody once said to me is and a good thought for you guys as a business is, you know, in 5 years or 3 years or whatever, how can you increase the revenue that you receive from your audience members that doesn't come from selling them an ad? You know, and really this mindset that starts with data first, that keeps that data close to the vest, but yet uses it to create a personalized experience is really a big success. For how it does. You know, these kinds of technologies and the data sources hook up to a lot of these marketing automation technologies, Marketo, HubSpot. A lot of them are relying and looking at a data source in terms of presenting some specialized content. And so, you know, whether it's knowledge marketing or whatever you use for a data source, the interrelationship between the content management system, the database, and the presentation of either the ad or the content is really, really an important and emerging area. So again, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you all again next month. Again, for those of you interested, you'll be given the opportunity to download and forward a recorded version of today. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we'll talk to you guys all again next month.